Hello everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to organise to come along and talk to you about industrial hemp. I'm hoping that it's a topic that you guys may be a little bit aware of, and over the next few years and decades it's really going to grow as an idea into an industry, and New Zealand's going to really benefit because there's opportunities to lead the world in this industry. And I'm just going to give you a bit of an idea around how we can do that in the sense of fibre today. So I'm here on behalf of the New Zealand Hemp Industries Association, and I'd like to just talk to you about what it is that we're talking about, which is, lo and behold, it is cannabis. I may as well acknowledge that at the beginning. You introduce cannabis into a conversation, it can get quite polarising. So it's really come a long way though. Medicinal cannabis has helped with that as well. But from our point of view, the food and the fibre as well as the wellness industry are the three pillars of a potential industry for New Zealand. We'll talk a little bit about how it can be used and what it means with the Kiwi ingenuity. The 80 years of prohibition that I've written up there is something to consider because not a lot of work has been done in this space. You know, the only real use for it has been an illegal recreational drug, and that's where all the focus has been. And we've missed the opportunity to a certain degree of looking at all the tech and the other products that can be made from such a versatile raw material. And this is all set to change because we now have access to it. So let's get started. Cannabis, it's in the law, it's referred to as Cannabis Sativa, but I'd point out that there's possibly three genesis that you could look at, being indica and a rudularis. So each one of those has got definitely a different look. You might argue that the sativa would be a fibre crop, long lengths of fibre, whereas indica a bit more bushy, so that's more biomass and seed crop. Or a blend of the two as a dual crop. And the leaves on the far right explain a little bit about the broad leaf versus a longer sativa leaf. Here's a crop being grown in Pukekohe. You'll see the female plants behind the male plants. The male plants shed their pollen and then die. So that's their role in life. This is a dioecious crop, so there's a male and a female on separate plants. There are monoecious crops, and all those sort of things are all part of a plant breeding program. That's another massive amount of work that needs to be done in New Zealand. But back to the fibre story. The picture on the left is Anne Jordan from the hemp farm, Dave and Anne Jordan, and that's fibre that's been processed green from the field. So it hasn't been retted, it's just a stem that's been split. Now on the right, that's the stem. So we've got two layers of bast fibre from the outside of the stem and this woody inner pith that we call the hurd, which is, all of it's very high in cellulose, the building blocks of plastic and things like that, but those are the two main sort of ingredients. And the reason why we don't have a massive fibre industry in New Zealand is that it requires a lot of effort to split those stems up, and that process is called decortication. And when you get it right, you end up with the raw material that Anne has on the left-hand screen. The reason why we know this is such a good idea is rooted in history. I mean, of course, I could go back and explain that we've been associated with this plant for 10,000 years. It was probably one of the earliest plants to be domesticated. The humans have used the fibre and the seed for all manner of purposes. But in this particular case, I'd like to draw your attention to a Popular Mechanics article in February 1938 that called it a $1 billion crop. In 1938, that's a lot of dollars. Now, the reason why it was there is because they had just developed a mechanical process to overcome this decortication step, the splitting of the stem into the fibre and the hurd. And so that was a major breakthrough because we no longer needed a real manual approach. And of course, with that machine, it came to realise that we could now make up to 25,000 possible commercial products out of the hurd alone. So when you hear people say hemp can make 25,000 products, it came from a Popular Mechanics article in 1938. Unfortunately, cannabis was banned under the word marijuana in 1937. So in this article, it acknowledges that there's a regulatory problem around the word hemp being banned as cannabis, or marijuana rather, but it shouldn't be a problem, it should be overcome. Well, little did they know it became a major problem and it was never overcome. So that was the end of the fibre industry in the States at that point. Now we'll get on to some other fibre uses, and this is the use of the hemp as a building material. So now we're looking at both the shivs or the hurd on the left, the fibre in the middle. You're looking at wool insulation. And there's also another fibre use which is really interesting, and that's hempcrete, which is this block on the left. So this is a concrete-like substance, 6 of the weight of concrete, doesn't require reinforcing, and it's made with hemp, the hurd, from the middle part of the plant, and a lime solution. So in effect, it petrifies. It goes from a vegetable state to a mineral state. And it's amazing, the thermal qualities are right up there, acoustically it's there, so it's warm in the winter, cool in the summer, houses that breathe, no condensation issues, a wonderful building material. On the right, I just wanted to go back, the picture on the bottom is from the Popular Mechanics article, and I just wanted to put that in there because it's interesting to see how it was used in the past when you had, for example, a sailing ship might have had 80 tonnes of hemp on board with its sails, with its uniforms, with the rope and the cordage, the oil that they wrote with in their pens, the charts were made out of hemp paper. The sailors would have carried around seed. They would have had barrels of seed on board in case they got shipwrecked. They could grow the hemp, produce the fibre, fix all their boats up because that's the caulking in the hull and that sort of thing. So apart from cordage, it was a well-used plant in the sense of uniforms as well. Other uses? So we have apparel and also the Adidas shoes, for example. You've got composite materials and plastic materials that are made from the hemp fibre being light and recyclable. So they're getting a big uptake in cars. The picture on the left is actually back when Henry Ford developed his cars, they were made from soya and hemp fibre. So he's laying into that with a sledgehammer and it's bouncing back. So we had the opportunities to decide to follow a hydrocarbon-based approach or a carbohydrate-based approach at the time when Henry Ford and Randolph Diesel were designing their motors and designing their cars. Of course, we all know that we followed a hydrocarbon approach, but it's interesting to know that we can, if we want to, follow a carbohydrate approach, and that is a real opportunity for New Zealand because that's the sustainable alternative use that we need to go for. Again, a fibre crop on the left, an example of more of a seed crop on the right. And this is why it was banned. And I just put this up there because I wanted to lighten the mood a little. But realistically, it was about this reefer madness. It highlighted a problem with marijuana being used. Marijuana is a Mexican slang word. They introduced a Marijuana Tax Act that no one in the hemp industry knew about. The American Medical Association didn't understand it, and it banned hemp by making it prohibitive to actually be involved in the industry because now you had to pay $1 per ounce of hemp. Well, that doesn't really help all the people that had it in their pharmacopoeia or were using it for bird seed for animals and things like that, but it was too late at that moment because they had got it through. That said, though, the UN does acknowledge that this is the UN Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. In section 28.2, it says, this convention shall not apply to the cultivation of the cannabis plant exclusively for industrial purposes, fibre and seed, or horticultural purposes. So even they acknowledge that there's a traditional industry out there and that we could have a hemp industry based on the uses that we can derive of products that we can derive from the growth of the plant. So this is what we ended up with, our Hemp Regulations 2006. Back in the 90s, there was an embargo. No one was talking about hemp. We had to lift that. We got the regulations in 2006, and it means that we can now produce hemp products, and hemp products can only be made by industrial hemp, and industrial hemp can only be grown under licence. So the Ministry of Health issues licences, and we can make industrial hemp products. So the biggest ones off the rank last year were the food, but the fibre is a really big one that we want to look at, the exciting opportunities there, and that's where this 80 years of prohibition, because Kiwi ingenuity has a massive amount to offer this space, and it has such a wide implications from plastics and textiles and geothermal products and food products and medicines that there's room for everybody to get involved. So I'd like to encourage you all to get involved, the ultimate in disruption, using disruptive technology to build upon a natural fibre that's got some really inherently good qualities of naturally antibacterial, antifungal, anti-static, antimicrobial, stops 95% of UV light. So who wouldn't want to use that in their garments and things? So my apologies, I've run a little over time, but that's how I get when I'm starting to talk about hemp. And you're a captive audience, so thank you for your time.